Welcome to Data BS, a show dedicated to tackling the big questions impacting the world of data and ML/AI without any of the BS. My name is James Winegar. Each week I sit down with guests from across the data ecosystem to unpack how they're shaping their businesses or the businesses of others through the real-world application of data engineering, ML/AI, infrastructure, analytics, and more. No fluff, unfiltered, but slightly edited to remove noise. This is Data BS. Let's get into it. All right, Carlos. Tell me who you are and what you do.
I'm Carlos Aguilar. I am the founder of Hashboard. So that's who I am and what I do.
Yeah. So what is Hashboard?
Hashboard is a semantic business intelligence tool, which means it's a system for cataloging and creating the metrics that drive your business and letting everybody in your organization explore those metrics and answer their own questions.
Why a semantic BI tool?
I think there's a couple of different workflows that analysts and data engineers and then the broader audience of analytics within an organization can adapt, right? And there's sort of the old mode, which is you have a bunch of dashboard builders, and every time you have a question, somebody submits a ticket to the dashboard builders and they build a dashboard. And maybe there's one filter on that dashboard or a couple filters on that dashboard. But ultimately, it's hard to interrogate those answers. It's hard for people in the broader organization to answer their own questions unless they know how to code or write some SQL, which, again, there's a lot of different workflows. So there's a lot of places where the culture is everybody's going to write SQL and get an answer. And that's totally fine. My background is in healthcare and supply chain, and those people were not learning SQL. And data was really, really important. So the whole workflow behind Semantic BI, and we're not the only Semantic BI tool, right? There's others. Things like Looker are popular examples. But in especially like a digital native type of company where everything is based on data and you have a lot of people that don't know how to code, it's really helpful to have a workflow where you can systematically create concepts. You can imagine, I was at Flatiron Health before, so defining things like patients or clinical trial patients activating into a clinical trial or joining a clinical trial, being screened for a clinical trial, defining all those concepts systematically. That's like the quote unquote semantic part. And then providing those to the organization so that they can consume them, they can mix and match and filter however they want and answer both their day-to-day questions operationally and their longer-term questions strategically, right?
Yeah, so like one of the things that I think about here is like semantic versus the dashboard builder workflow is if they have like the dashboard builder workflow, you end up with the definition of like what is a patient, which is if people have worked in healthcare is like a really hard question to answer sometimes, or a visit or an appointment or whatever. And you end up with 16 versions of that metric that then like somebody pulls up whatever their favorite dashboard is that got built for them 6 years ago, right? That has like an older version of what the definition of a patient is that has been updated, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly they're making decisions based off of something that like really isn't directionally correct. And it might have been good at the time, but 6 years later drifted from what that organization thinks of as a patient or whatever. So It's kind of like two things we really talked about there, I think. It's like the ability to define those metrics and then the ability to like leverage those metrics to actually like manage your workflow. And so we use Hashboard as well. So I really like the fact that we can enable like an explore-based workflow for regular users who have low code skills, but like are data savvy enough to, get some counts and bar chart, whatever, type of thing and help answer the questions that they need to, like what patients should be in a clinical trial. Right. So It's like, let's start with metrics because that kind of defines how to do explore. And then we'll get into like the explore workflow. So could you explain how Hashboard's metric trees help ensure this like single source of truth for definition of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key problems that we're solving is that in a typical scaled organization, you have a lot of different sources of truth for how the company is performing. And so even if you have another semantic BI tool, like let's say Looker, you might still have 20 versions of a metric in different dashboards because Looker has a concept of data models and things they call explorers, which are very organized and have different concepts, but then you can have different explorers. And so one of our unique innovations, which to us feels pretty obvious, is that we have a centralized concept of a metric, right? So you have data models, so you can represent sales and patients and things as concepts, but then you put a line in the sand and you say, this is the specific calculation of how we want to look at revenue. And there is a centralized page with all of the metrics for the entire organization. And there's literally exactly one place where you can put that metric. And that metric will define things like filters. It will define things like a time grade. So it's like we want to look at monthly active users, not just active users, and cut it in any different way. So it sort of is a workflow for the organization to be able to define set of key performance indicators and attach metadata. So you can attach goals, you can attach owners, and because this is all tied into our semantic layer, you can click in and immediately start exploring that data. And if you see a metric drop, you can start interrogating why that happened. So metric trees are another layer of it's sort of an opt-in feature where you can start organizing your metrics into a folder-like structure. But the concept is really to build a tree around a hierarchy of goals around your business. So typically what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a single North Star metric, typically something that goes up or can go a count of something that is going up and to the right. Hopefully not just money, right? Like your organization does not exist just to create money. It exists to, if you're Facebook, to connect the world's population or whatever it is, if you're Hashboard, to share insights. So you want to be driving the creation of insights, right? So you have this one North Star metric and everybody should be aligned around driving this North Star metric. And then the question is, in a large scaled organization, how are random people in random parts of the organization driving this North Star metric? So a metric tree allows you to create a formula where you're effectively bringing all the constituent parts of driving this North Star metric. So if you're trying to connect the world's population, maybe there's 5 business divisions and they're all contributing some percentage to that North Star metric. And so those 5 sub-metrics become a child of this North Star metric. And then within that, there's going to be maybe 3 or 4 driver metrics, right? And again, it's going to be some formula. It's like, okay, within this, actually we're doing paid search to try to get some inbound folks so that we can grow this North Star metric. That's the growth team. The product team is trying to maintain retention, and there is some formula for how the product team is actually driving this North Star metric. So this hierarchy within Hashboard allows you to define a formula that defines how every single last team is contributing to this mission and to this overall goal that the business is driving. And it's a little bit aspirational. Can every company do this? No. And is it always going to be data that's readily available? Not necessarily, but like you should try to systematize it as much as possible.
Yeah, the biggest thing I see is like, just to bring it back to money, because it's honestly like something that's easy to talk about comparatively to like product metrics and things like that, is like the definition of revenue is different in different parts of the business. And they're talking about like, if you have like a large capital expenditure because you're like a CPG organization, like maybe,
Yep.
maybe you have like a lot of R&D for certain product lines or brands or whatever, but then you don't really have R&D for, let's just say, Kleenex or something like that, right? Like, it is the thing it is, and it's been the same thing roughly for 100 years. So like how they split out and like come up with what their overall revenue is might be slightly different between those different business units and different regulatory things that they might have to deal with, or maybe they're in different parts of the world and there's different tax allocations and things like that if you split it out by like geography. So there's a bunch of different ways that you want to roll it up to this like the revenue metric, which is honestly really hard to talk about for a large organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have these metric trees or just metrics, right? Like either way, because Hashboard semantic, it's supporting metrics. And then we're able to do like exploration on top of that. So take a metric, active users, and then or daily active users or monthly active users, and then being able to split it out by various things. And so can you talk a little bit more about like the Explorer workflow within Hashboard and why you think it's differentiated or valuable or whatever word you want to use?
So the motivation for starting Hashboard in the first place was I was running a data team as VP of Data Insights at Flatiron Health and managing a lot of different data assets that were going to dozens of different teams and being built into dozens of different products. And there were, I guess my observation about visualization tools is that a lot of different diverse stakeholders. You have the whole point of business intelligence is that you're like aligning the whole organization, and different people have dramatically different expectations. And so you have technical people who are trying to manage it, and their normal tool set is code, and like they want to do things in continuous integration, and they have all their tools that they're used to using. And then the BI tool looks sort of different. And then folks outside of the data team, they don't care about that code-based stuff. They want easy insights. They want to be able to answer their own questions. Or some folks aren't even that curious to answer their own questions, right? They just want to check a number. They want to make sure that it's reliable and trustworthy. And so the original motivation was looking at these tools and realizing that the code-based folks didn't have the workflows that they loved. And I spent a lot of time teaching people about data visualization and analytics. And it felt like the tools weren't teaching people how to think about data. And after teaching a lot of people Tableau and how to build dashboards and about data visualization and about SQL and all these things and trying to activate people and get people to insights, I just noticed some basic patterns of how people should approach data. And so I had a very systematic way that I would tell people to build dashboards, which is like start tracking things over time, pick your key sort of metrics, break it down by the key drivers, like break it down by a couple key attributes. And I had like literally this template. Actually, I wrote this up in a blog too, like how to build dashboards and BI for data engineers. Because oftentimes data engineers might be amazing at pipelines, but they're actually not that good at visualization. So I had this like very gentle way of introducing data visualization to people where like you couldn't actually get a wrong answer, right? It's like if you just say, start with a good data set, which honestly is oftentimes the hardest part. You start with a good data set, and the intuition is start tracking some like the key things over time, break it down by the key sort of attributes, and look at the distributions. It's the fundamentals of exploratory data analysis. So that's the intuition that we built the Data Explorer on, is it just does that workflow. It does it for free, and it does it every time. And so you model the data's clean. That's your job as the data team. And once you do that, Hashboard picks it up, and it has an automatic way of representing data that is the way that you should start visualizing it and finding insights. And yeah, it's time series by default, time series oriented, but obviously you can change to pivot tables. And so the whole idea behind the workflow is having smart defaults, right? Like the thing you should start looking at, but a lot of flexibility. So you can pivot into like whatever multi-chart trellis like version of calculations you want to, but you start with something simple, like a gentle introduction into the data set.
Yeah, I think like this is like totally an aside right now. So one of the things I run into a lot, so just like our customers typically are a little bit smaller. They do not have a data team. And so a lot of the work that we do is like data literacy in like how to like take advantage of their data. Like are you even able to ask the questions that you want to ask? Because they're not really at that point yet. And one of the things we run into a lot is like they have their database that drives some application or a vendor tool or ERP or something like that. And then they're trying to answer questions like over time, like you're talking about, like new user activation, campaign, whatever, pick your poison. And sometimes you can't answer those questions from the transactional database because you don't actually have like what happened with a user or what happened with an order. You just have like, what is the current state? And so the data engineers team or the data team or whoever is also there to help support getting to that, slowly changing dimension version of the table so that you could provide that out to the users. But now, like, because you have metrics defined in Hashboard that can leverage the fact that they have this slowly changing dimension table, they don't have to think about it from that viewpoint anymore. Like you're kind of like operational user or your executive user, right? Like they just go, here's the metric that I care about. It's already handled by the data team about like all these technical details. And now I want to split that out by, I don't know, you have like a bunch of pizza store demos, right? I can split that out by like which location or which provider or which nurse or what person in the warehouse did the packing or whatever. And so let's see what happened over time across those different like users or dimensions or whatever word we want to use. And so like I think it's really powerful to kind of like take away the like having to ask questions about like the technical details. Like people don't have to think about it to like bring it forward. What do you think the Hashboard's like solving that problem in the smaller market? I know you're moving more mid market.
Yeah. So I think we're trying to take a little bit of that complexity away. I think that's exactly right. And it's really about picking those defaults. And you mentioned tracking things over time. Like why does Hashboard use that as like the foundation? Like why is it that by default? It's because in like usually the things that you want to set up as an actual tool, you want to operationalize, and things that are operationally interesting are changing over time by definition. So it's not like a survey result that you want to look at a single time. Like you might want to do that, but that's not something that you're going to be checking every day. The things that you're checking every day are naturally like you want to look at differences over time. And so yeah, just anchoring on that time series and making it feel more like a consumer type of experience where you're just looking at your metrics, exploring those, and able to find trends in those without like, thinking about the technical architecture or their transactional database and all the work that went into it. It's like a curated, we think of it as like a curated place where people like you, James, who are like spending a lot of time organizing data can like show off what they've built in a really clean and organized way.
Yeah, I never like with Tableau, I'm just gonna compare it to Tableau for a second. Like with Tableau, I never would have dreamed like providing like a truly explorer to like give the ability to like a CEO to like go and change not the filters but like group buys and things like that, and then like expose 20 different filters to them to be able to like do what they need to do, right? Because in Tableau like you kind of like lose the ability to like manage the dashboard when you do that, whereas like at least in Hashboard like I'm really seeing like a strong workflow there, and we have one of our clients, CEO, is like actively using it now. And so I think it's just really powerful like workflow that like any end user can take advantage of. And now like honestly like that gets rid of so many requests as well, like these like little dinky like, oh, I just want to change like this event filter, but then like, or like when I change this event filter I also want to like look at it from some other category, right? And like that change, maybe that's semantically a little bit different, and like giving those users the ability, whether they're operational or executive or even data team, right, to be able to answer the questions, I think is really powerful. So Hashboard, like I think it is really nice tool, right? And why? Because like not only do you have like this nice user workflow, but you also have a nice developer workflow that ties into it, which usually people have picked either side of that coin and let the other one faint. But I think you've tied those together really nicely. So let's talk about like the version control for Hashboard, and like if I do an explore, how does that like come into version control and manage like the BI from code-driven workflow?
Yeah, it turns out, so the vision here is that you have data pipelines, maybe they're in DBT or some like at scale, right? Like, or at any sort of like moderately sized organization, you're going to have data pipelines, probably checked into code somewhere, and you're making changes, right? You're adding new business lines, things are changing over time. And it's really painful when you're making those changes to coordinate it with the business intelligence tool. If it isn't code-based at all, then probably what you do is you have to set up some really sophisticated staging environment, or you just like deploy the thing to production and like watch stuff sort of break and try to coordinate and time changes. And so what we've been trying to imagine is like, what's a world where you can actually hook things up end to end and run them in continuous integration. So you're proposing changes to your data pipelines. You can also propose code-based changes to your dashboards at the same time. The hard thing about doing this is usually, and this I think is your point, is like usually you have to like either make the whole tool entirely code-based. And I think of tools like Evidence is like a cool dashboarding tool, which is like very like almost entirely code-based. And so like the people who are like finding the insights, people who are like building every chart are doing it in pure code. So that's one approach. And that's like that's a relatively easy thing that you can do. Just like write code for the entirety of your analytics process. It's not really achievable for a lot of organizations. And I honestly think the best thing about BI tools and like visualization tools is that they're clicky and you can like explore and build your own charts and do your own thing. And so the question is, how do you mix these two workflows? And so what Hashboard has is like our actual underlying data structure has like sort of a Git oriented architecture where we track every change as a set of differences. And so even as like an end user, as you're clicking around, like we have this history of everything that's ever happened in the tool. What this architecture allows us to do is a lot of things. So it allows you to revert to previous points in history. You can see like an audit log of everything that's ever happened in the project. You can easily fork it. So if you want, you can create what we call a project draft, which means you take the entire BI tool, create sort of like your own sandbox and can start playing around and propose changes to the data team, which is almost like a code-based workflow. And it turns out what this architecture allows us to do is represent every single resource either as code or with point and click workflows. So every dashboard has a code-based representation, and it also has like a way of editing with point and click. And so in practice, the way people use this and like sort of interact with this is that they will have, if you want to never really use code and just point and click the entire time, that's always an option, right? So you can always just like, but as soon as you're sophisticated enough or like have gotten to the point where change management and coordinating things with code is now difficult, what you can do is you can take those important data models, those important dashboards, check them in, lock them down, and now they can only be deployed with code. And we have a command line interface for engineers, which can be run in continuous integration. It can also be run for development. And if you're using dbt, we have a tie-in with dbt too. That's also an optional integration. So if you want to do code-based workflows without dbt, that's also an option. So just like a lot of flexibility in those workflows. And so, yeah, people really love this workflow. We have more and more customers that are just coming in purely for the code-based workflow. And like, that's also awesome to see. The developer experience is pretty delightful. So you build your dbt models, you build those models with a command line tool with a single command, you build those right into Hashboard as your semantic layer. So you're deploying dbt sort of as your semantic layer, and there isn't duplication of effort. And probably the nicest thing about all these workflows is business users never really have to know about them, and they're all optional and opt-in, right? So we have folks who are, I think one of the other principles for these sort of sophisticated BI tools, Looker sort of says that it's not really for small teams, right? Looker is for 100 plus person companies. Hashboard really scales to zero. So like you can start with this more sophisticated tool and opt into these sophisticated features when it makes sense for your organization.
Yeah, the scale to zero is a really interesting like aspect of Hashboard to me because like it has all the tooling to support a larger organization, but like the way everything's hooked in allows you to I can have an analyst on a very small client and they just do that work within Hashboard, and that just happens point and click at that point. Okay, now we're at a more mature client. Maybe they have their own data engineering team. Maybe we're helping with some other project. Okay, hey, we're gonna have some mixed work there, most likely, where a lot of analyst work is happening within Hashboard point and click style, but DPT is driving like a semantic layer. And then you can, like you were talking about, lock down the whole thing. Pushes to production have to go through CI/CD. There's a separate staging environment. All these like like lifecycle management capabilities that you do as best practices for the code workflow, but now you can bring it to the data workflow as well. And the fact that it's opt-in at every stage is just like, I think, a really powerful story about like Hashboard as a tool and how it scales with an organization. Because like it's a
Yeah.
tool that you can start with. You don't have to start with Power BI or Tableau or something like that, because it's like your initial cost for like Power BI is like $10 a month, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't have to go deploy like your own metabase or something like that. Just go,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to sign up for Hashboard. Okay, cool. Like we're working. Year goes by, suddenly you're a 100-person company because whatever, you got product market fit or something like that. Boom. Okay, let's just like take Hashboard and improve the workflow. But because Hashboard has all the hooks, like we're good to go to like just continue to evolve our processes. I don't have to change tools. I just have to change
Yeah.
process, which is a little bit easier. Not a lot easier,
Yep.
but a little bit easier. So
Yep. Yep.
so there's two things that you talked about with like this version control that like made me think about larger organizations. So when you're talking about, you have all these diffs, right, that you're tracking every single change across, and you're able to create like an audit log and things like that across every dashboard or exploration or metric or pick your poison, right? So what's Hashboard's approach to like maintaining and managing governance across the platform?
Yeah. It's a really important question because we're trying to strike this balance of something that's like really accessible and anybody can go in and do stuff and explore and create stuff and create dashboards. But then we also like the core problem we're trying to solve is multiple sources of truth. And so that's actually, I think the thing that ties that story together is governance. So we've seen, I think over the last decade, as self-service has become more of a trend in the data space, and you have tools like Looker or Sigma or others that are just everybody sort of getting into the data and creating resources. What you see is like a dramatic increase in the number of users, and a dramatic, because those users need more data sources, you have a dramatic increase in the number of data sources that have to be put into the tool in order to support those users. And then all those people creating a bunch of stuff. And then all of a sudden you have the same problem where it's like, which is the right version of stuff, even though you have this self-service environment. So what we try to have some of that. Obviously everything's role-based, so based on the role, but like our defaults are that things are pretty permissive, right? So people can come in and start creating stuff. And so what are the tools that we give people so that that doesn't just become chaos? So we have a lot of governance tools. So we have a verification workflow. So you can verify which resources are actually right and real. We have assignees, so you can assign or say that the data team and the data team assigned workflows are the real dashboards that you should be looking at. You can set the defaults for which things are actually visible in the project, right? So like if you want only verified resources to be visible, you can set that as the default for each of those pages. So only verified metrics are visible. We have things like drafting, which I brought up already, where maybe you actually don't want to give everybody access to create dashboards. So you lock that down and you create a workflow where people have to create a draft and send it to the data team in order to publish that dashboard into production. And then, there's a lot that this empowers, right? And also just like I mentioned it before also, but like being able to restore to different points in history, that's a really strong governance feature as well. And my personal favorite, which I think we're the only BI tool that does this or visualization tool that does this, is auto archive, where the challenge with dashboards often is that they have like a one-time utility, right? There's a product launch and you create a dashboard just for the product launch. But then that dashboard lives in perpetuity, even though it had an implicit sort of expiration date. And so we have an auto archive feature, which takes every resource, the default behavior, and again, it's very configurable, but the default behavior is it takes every resource that is not verified, that has not been looked at in the last month, and it puts it in the trash. So you can restore it, but it puts it in the trash. So it just naturally keeps the project clean over time. And so, we're trying to strike a balance. It's a lot of work to deploy these features, but ultimately the approach is governed and curated. Let everybody explore and do a bunch of stuff and put this governance layer on top of it that allows you to know what the right things are at any given time.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I've been thinking about with Hashboard is like, how do you actually manage the complexity of allowing these different hook-ins for everybody? I think maybe not a topic for for right now, but it's something that I go, and this is really complicated to like build a tool that does this kind of opt-in across the board like functionality. So we've talked about like how Hashboard allows scaling from really small organizations up to mid-sized organizations, and also supporting like very large organizations with this like deferral-based workflow. Where is Hashboard sitting in the market right now in terms of like their biggest successes, and then where do you think you're going to be going over the next 3 to 6 months?
So I think as a startup, the inclination is to like sell into other really small startups. And in BI, there's so much to build that's sort of the inclination. What we found, honestly, is that we're a little bit up market. We succeed best when there is a data team, when you have more problems around sources of truth. Like when you're really, really small, just like write a simple SQL query, or maybe that'll make do. We do sell to organizations that size, but like really where the value proposition is really, really strong is when you start having really, really messy data and you need a place to really centralize that logic. So yeah, we see the best fit in the mid-market organizations between 100 and 1,000 employees today. And we do see a lot of appetite for continuous integration and these code-based practices far up market from that. But that's where we really see good success today.
Okay, awesome. So hopefully we'll go up market into the enterprise where the margins are better, and then be able to grow the team a little bit more. So on the point of growing the team, is Hashboard currently hiring
engineers and sellers? So account executives. So we're growing our sales org, and our first full-time marketer we're also looking for. So mostly in New York, where we are a little bit flexible, but we have an office based in New York, in Soho, and we come in every day. And so we do have that culture. And so looking for sales folks with some data experience, and then software engineers. Really, we're always mostly flexible and looking for great folks, but probably a slight bias towards application and principal sort of like front end folks right now.
Very awesome. So where can people find out more about Hashboard and Carlos?
Hashboard.com for just like our blog and our latest. Follow us on LinkedIn, and we're Hashboard HQ on LinkedIn if people actually use those handles to find things. Hashboard HQ on Twitter as well to follow our updates.
Awesome. Well, it's great to talk to you, Carlos. You really appreciate it. Hope you have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
That's it for this episode of Data BS. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and not miss the next one. This episode was sponsored by CorrDyn, a data consultancy that helps organizations unlock the power of their data. If you have a data challenge, we can help. Visit CorrDyn.com, CorDyn.com, to learn more. See you next time.